Hello, today we're going to be reading the book, Chapter 1, When the World Turns Upside Down. The world tilts. Shayla, Miss Burkus called. Are you listening? Shayla didn't even move. She sat at her desk, her head leaning on her hand, her thick, dark hair hallowing her head like one of the fluffy clouds outside the window. She was busy staring at the tall tree that stood in the corner of the schoolyard. It didn't matter what subject Miss Burkus was teaching. If Shayla didn't have something to do with her hands, her mind drifted, and her attention shifted to the window where she would look at the tree branches and daydream. Everybody circled around the tree at recess for 90 dizzying minutes. Kids of all shapes and sizes clustered around it, learning how its smooth bark, playing tag around its bored trunk, and sitting on its huge knotty roots. But during the long, lonely hours while everyone was in class, Shayla was the tree's only playmate. On this morning, Shayla was imagining the tree branches were sea creatures. The tiny, bright green buds sprouting from the branches were the creatures' scales, and the tree trunks was submarine diving down to the ocean floor. Miss Brickman called Shayla's name a third time, but she didn't answer. A slap of her arm finally tore her away from her thoughts. Ow, she said, snapping her attention back to the classroom. The room was completely quiet, and Megan was smirking at her in the next seat over. Why you do that? She whispered. Megan didn't answer. Instead, she tilted her head towards the front of the classroom. Miss Berkman was looking at Shayla sharply, and her classmates were staring at her silently like a bunch of wide-eyed frogs. Oh, Shayla said under her breath, suddenly realizing Miss Berkman was waiting on an answer. But Shayla hadn't heard the question. She's asking about the book, Megan whispers. Shayla sat up taller in her seat and looked at the colorful poster stuck to the wall as if they could magically reveal the answer to her. Just past Megan, she could see Gemma hiding her mouth behind her hands, her shoulders shaking with laughter. Well, I think, Shayla said, slowly stretching every syllable and crossing her fingers under the desk for good luck. She was just about to launch into a rambling description of the chapter from last night's homework when the principal rushed into the room and dumped an armful of orange paper on Miss Birkin's desk. One second class, Miss Bergen said, and Shayla slumped against the back of her chair in relief. Your participation grade is going to be horrible, Megan said as Miss Bergen and the principal started whispering in front of the room. The word horrible so hard Shayla felt like it had flown out of Megan's mouth and smacked into her cheek at the top speed. She was never ready for Miss B called on her. Gemma threw it. Nobody asked you, Shayla snapped. She sank even deeper into her seat, wishing she could pull a tent over her desk. She peeked down at the sore spot on her arm where Megan had hit her. Her skin was stinging and it was slightly raised, but it was the same brown color as the rest of her skin. So different from the red mark that would be left behind if she had smacked Megan back. We're on chapter 6, a soft voice whispered from the seat behind me. Shayla swerved around and found herself face to face with AI. What? Shayla whispered back. She hadn't even realized she was sitting there. I said, we're talking about chapter 6, AI repeated. Then she flicked her finger up to the point at Megan and Gemma. They would giggle together. You think that's how friends are supposed to treat you? She asked. Shayla shrugged, but she couldn't turn away. There was nothing mean to AI's voice. She just looked at Shayla and the bucket load of sadness in her eyes. Shayla sat there, trapped between a glare of AI honestly and the pull of Megan and Gemma's friendship. AI sighed into the emptiness of Shayla's silence. She wants to explain why the main character left home at the end of the chapter. You did read, didn't you? The AI eyebrows drew together, made Shayla think. IA questions was about so much more than homework. I read things, Shayla said, suddenly finding her words. She knew her response was short and sharp, but she didn't care. Why did AI think she could decide who Shayla should be friends with? She twisted back to the front of the classroom and straightened herself in her seat. She peeked over to Megan and Gemma. They were huddling together, talking and giggling as Shayla wasn't even there. This was how it had all been all year. Shayla didn't know how it had happened, but she was full of a fear that made her turn her back at AI so she could hang out at the edge of Megan and Gemma's friendship, trying to find a way in. Student Miss Brakes said, clapping her hands to call everyone's attention before Shayla could figure out what Megan and Gemma were talking about. Miss Brakes held up the stack of papers the principal had brought in. From the seat, Shayla could see the word school closure in big bold letters across the top of her page. As you know, we have discussed how to continue safely teaching during this time. Some of your classmates are already learning from home, and some of your parents are working from home. We have just received words that the governor has decided to close schools for the next 2 weeks. What? Megan said. She looked at Shayla, then they were briefly connected in shock. Shayla turned back and looked at AI. Everyone started talking at once. Miss Birkin clapped again. She put both of her hands in the air and held them there until everyone in the class fell silent. We will communicate with your parents, she said, softly and firmly. We will send your assignments to complete at home. She looked at the clock on the wall, then walked to the doorway of the classroom. You are dismissed. Please stop at your desk and pick up one of the announcements. Put these sheets in your folder immediately and give them to your parents as soon as you get home. Shayla stood up for the rest of the class, unfolding her long limbs from the small, cramped chair. Megan, she called out, but Megan has already slipped away, rushing towards the front of the classroom. With her arms tightly linked with Gemma, Shayla darted out from behind her desk, but someone tugged her back. She turned to find AI and Ben standing behind her. What? Shayla asked, trying hard not to sound as grunchy as she felt. She felt like the tree in the yard, towering over AI and Ben. She shifted her weight on her hip, which made her tower over them just a tiny bit less. It wasn't like she didn't like AI and Ben. It's just like they felt like she couldn't get away from them. They all live in the same apartment building. They had spent their toddler years in their friend Liam's apartment, so Liam's mom could watch them while their parents worked. They spent the first years of elementary school hanging out in the park together, and now AI and Ben were in class at school. Shayla had enough. Shayla had enough. She wanted to try to make her own friends, at least ones who and her father didn't make for her. We have to find Liam, Ben says, alterated. He didn't like Shayla's new attitude. Why? Shayla asked. She crossed her arms. It didn't matter what AI and Ben thought. She had the right to be independent. How do you think he's taking this news? AI asked, circling her finger in the air. Shayla's heart sank. She was instantly ashamed. She was so busy feeling trapped by AI and Ben. She hadn't even thought about Liam. Change was not his friend. Once, when a substitute teacher showed up and announced he was replacing Liam for a teacher. Rest of the school year, he shut himself in the supply closet and refused to come out. While he raced to call his mom, and he tugged at his hair so hard he could yank out a patch of the size of a dime. With a serious nod, Shayla turned on her heel and headed over to the hooks, reaching over everyone else's heads and tugged down. AI and Ben's bags. The three of them shrugged on their jackets and wrestled their backpack straps onto their shoulders, just like that. Every thought that was cluttering Shayla's brain fell away. Shayla forgot about wishing for a new friend and sped out of classroom, focusing on doing everything she could to get Liam's side.